In ancient Rome, a young emperor comes to power promising a golden age. But beneath the surface lies a deep darkness, a madness that will consume him and plunge Rome into an era of terror. His name is Caligula, and this is his villainy. Hello and welcome to Fireside Villainies, where we step into the dark shadows of history and explore the chilling tales of history's most infamous figures. My name is Michael, and in this episode we dive into the depths of depravity with the story of a Roman emperor whose madness and cruelty plunged an empire into chaos. He is Caligula, a name synonymous with tyranny and excess. Thank you for watching and listening to Fireside Villainies. Let's now gather around the fire and take a brief look at what was happening during Caligula's time that contributed to his sinister tale. A storm was brewing in the heart of the Roman Empire. The year is 37 CE, and the mighty realm, stretching from the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean to the misty hills of Britannia, finds itself at a crossroads. The revered Emperor Tiberius, a man of iron will and shrewd calculation, has breathed his last. His death leaves a void, a hunger for power that echoes through the halls of the Senate and the bustling streets of Rome. Into this vacuum steps a young man, Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known by his childhood nickname, Caligula. The beloved grandson of the legendary Augustus, Caligula ascends the throne amidst a wave of optimism. He is the darling of the legions, a charismatic figure who promises a new era of prosperity and glory. But beneath the veneer of charm and youthful exuberance lies a darkness, a seed of madness that will soon blossom into a reign of terror. Caligula's story is one of ambition, cruelty, and the intoxicating allure of absolute power. It's a tale of a man who, in the words of the historian Suetonius, was born for the destruction of mankind. From the lavish palaces of Rome to the blood-soaked sands of the Colosseum, Caligula's reign has left an indelible mark on the annals of history. His story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most promising beginnings can descend into the darkest depths of depravity. In this episode of Fireside Villainies, we delve into the life and times of the third Roman Emperor, Caligula, exploring the events and personalities that shaped his infamous reign. From his complex relationship with his predecessor Tiberius to the web of political intrigue that surrounded him, we'll uncover the forces that fueled his descent into madness. Join me as we journey back to ancient Rome, to a time when the fate of an empire rested in the hands of a man consumed by his own twisted desires. Prepare yourself for the descent into Caligula's madness. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Would Be God. In the heart of the Roman Empire, amidst the grandeur of palaces and the clamor of legions, a young boy was born. The year was 12 CE, and the place was Antium, a coastal town renowned for its beauty and tranquility. Here, amidst the gentle lapping of waves and the scent of salt air, Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus entered the world. This child, born into a lineage of power and ambition, would one day become known to the world by a far less regal name, Caligula. Caligula's childhood was anything but ordinary. He was born into a lineage steeped in both power and tragedy, a legacy that would shape his destiny in profound ways. His father, Germanicus, was a celebrated military commander, a hero of the Roman people, and the adopted son of the reigning emperor Tiberius. Germanicus's own father was Nero Claudius Drusus, a distinguished general and the younger brother of Tiberius. But Caligula's connection to greatness didn't end there. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was a woman of fierce determination and unwavering loyalty. She was the granddaughter of the revered Augustus, Rome's first emperor, and the daughter of Marcus Agrippa, Augustus's close friend and right-hand man. This lineage placed Caligula directly in the bloodline of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the most powerful family in the Roman world. Raised in the shadow of such illustrious figures, Caligula's childhood was a whirlwind of military campaigns and political scheming. He spent his formative years in the bustling military camps that dotted the empire's frontiers, surrounded by the hardened soldiers who idolized his father. It was here, amidst the marching boots and clanging swords, that he earned his infamous nickname. The soldiers, amused by the sight of the toddler in his miniature military uniform, dubbed him Caligula, meaning little boots. But despite the playful nickname, there are few clear records of any early signs of cruelty in the young prince. While Caligula would later become infamous for his brutality, historical accounts of his childhood do not confirm the darker impulses attributed to him later in life. Rather, his childhood was marked by the exposure to the harsh realities of military life, as well as the tragedies that would come to define his youth. Caligula displayed a brilliance that captivated those around him. He possessed a sharp intellect, a mind that absorbed knowledge with voracious hunger. He devoured the works of philosophers and poets, debated with scholars, and displayed a precocious understanding of military strategy and political machinations. His wit was as sharp as his tongue, and he could charm even the most hardened cynics with his clever repartee and disarming smile. This combination of intellect and charisma made Caligula a magnetic presence, even in his youth. He effortlessly navigated the treacherous currents of court life, earning the favor of influential senators and captivating the common people with his charm. Many saw in him a glimmer of hope, a future leader who possessed both the strength and the wisdom to guide the empire to new heights. As Caligula grew into adolescence, the political landscape of Rome shifted dramatically. The year 19 CE marked a tragic turning point in Caligula's life. His father, Germanicus, the beloved general and heir apparent, was struck down by a sudden and devastating illness while on a diplomatic mission in the East. The news of his death sent shockwaves through Rome, plunging the empire into mourning. Whispers of foul play swirled through the streets and corridors of power. Germanicus had been a popular figure, admired for his military prowess and loyalty to Rome. His sudden demise at the age of 33, while in the prime of his life, seemed too convenient for some. Suspicion fell on the powerful governor of Syria, Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso, who had clashed with Germanicus on several occasions. Rumors circulated that Piso had poisoned the beloved general, acting on the orders of the Emperor Tiberius himself. The truth behind Germanicus's death remains shrouded in mystery and left a void in the heart of Rome, a void that would soon be filled by the enigmatic figure of Tiberius. For 7-year-old Caligula and his mother Agrippina, it was a devastating blow, sending them into a world of grief and uncertainty. A cunning and paranoid ruler, Tiberius, even in the wake of Germanicus's death, couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion that danger lurked within the young Caligula. Though just a boy of 7, Caligula represented a lineage tied to the beloved Germanicus. a popularity that could easily be wielded against the emperor. Tiberius, ever watchful for threats to his power, saw a spark of ambition in the child's eyes, a potential rival waiting to emerge. Agrippina recognized the perilous situation. She understood that her children, not just Caligula, but all 6 of her offspring, were now pawns in the deadly game of imperial politics. With the loss of Germanicus, their protector and advocate, they were vulnerable to the whims of a suspicious and increasingly paranoid emperor. With fierce maternal instinct, she vowed to protect them all at any cost. Caligula's later childhood was spent under Tiberius's watchful eye. In his teenage years, the boy and his family were effectively exiled to the island of Capri, where Tiberius kept them under tight control. During these years, Caligula lived in the isolation of Tiberius's court, where he would have witnessed the emperor's cruelty, political purges, and indulgence in debauchery. This period of near solitude, marked by fear and suspicion, likely shaped Caligula's view of power and survival in the treacherous world of Roman politics. Agrippina carefully crafted an image of Caligula as an innocent and harmless child. She schooled him in the art of dissimulation, teaching him to mask his true feelings and ambitions. Caligula, aware of the emperor's distrust, learned to play a dangerous game of survival. He carefully concealed his true nature, adopting a mask of obedience and deference. But beneath the surface, his resentment simmered, fueled by ambition and a growing thirst for power. In the court of Tiberius, where trust was a rare commodity and whispers of conspiracy filled the air, Agrippina became Caligula's shield and guardian. She fought tooth and nail to ensure his survival, even as the emperor's paranoia deepened and the shadows of suspicion lengthened. Caligula's once vibrant household, filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of family bonds, became a fortress under siege. Agrippina, a master strategist, carefully cultivated alliances and nurtured friendships with influential senators. She played the role of the grieving widow to perfection, her public displays of sorrow masking a steely resolve. At the heart of this web of intrigue stood Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the cunning and ambitious Praetorian prefect, commander of the emperor's elite bodyguard. Sejanus, driven by a hunger for power that rivaled even Tiberius's own, saw in the emperor's paranoia an opportunity to further his own agenda. He became Tiberius's confidant, whispering poison in his ear and stoking the flames of his suspicion. Sejanus, ever vigilant, saw through Agrippina's facade. He spun a web of lies and deceit, manipulating Tiberius's mind against Agrippina and her children. He painted them as traitors, their loyalty to Rome questioned at every turn. The family walked a tightrope, their every move watched, their every word twisted and scrutinized. In 29 CE, the blow finally fell. Tiberius, swayed by Sejanus's venomous whispers, banished Agrippina and her 2 eldest sons, Nero and Drusus, to desolate islands scattered across the Mediterranean. Caligula, spared from this initial purge, was sent to live under the watchful eye of his great-grandmother, Livia Augusta, the formidable widow of Augustus. The family was torn apart, their bonds of love stretched to the breaking point. Nero and Drusus, proud young men with promising futures, found themselves trapped in a living nightmare. Falsely accused of treason, they were subjected to relentless persecution and humiliation. Driven to despair, Nero took his own life at 25 years of age, a tragic end to a life cut short by cruelty and injustice. Drusus, weakened by starvation and isolation, met a similar fate at 26 years of age, his spirit broken by the relentless torment. Agrippina, her heart shattered by the loss of her sons, refused to surrender. She endured the harsh conditions of her exile with stoic determination, her love for her remaining children fueling her will to survive. But the years of hardship took their toll. In 33 CE, Agrippina, at the age of 43, weakened by hunger and despair, breathed her last, leaving Caligula and his sisters to face an uncertain future alone. The family's ordeal was a testament to the brutal realities of Roman politics, where power struggles and paranoia often led to tragedy. Yet, even amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope remained. Caligula, 21 years old when his mother died, hardened by adversity and schooled in the art of survival, emerged from this period of exile with a newfound resolve. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the fragility of human life. But Caligula was not simply a survivor. He was also a master of reinvention. With his mother and brothers gone, he carefully cultivated a new persona, one that would disarm his enemies and endear him to the Roman people. He embraced the role of the dutiful grandson, paying homage to Tiberius and feigning loyalty to the aging emperor. He charmed the masses with his wit and charisma, and his youthful energy and enthusiasm offered a stark contrast to the somber and oppressive atmosphere of Tiberius's court. In the year 37 CE, the island of Capri, once a haven of pleasure and debauchery, became a tomb. Tiberius, the aging emperor, lay on his deathbed, his once mighty grip on power slipping away with each labored breath. The news of his impending demise sent tremors through the empire, igniting a frenzy of anticipation and intrigue. In the shadowy corridors of the palace, ambitious courtiers jockeyed for position, their whispers echoing in the marble halls. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's formidable bodyguard, held the key to the succession. Their loyalty, bought and paid for with gold and promises, would determine the fate of Rome. Sejanus, the cunning Praetorian prefect, saw his moment. He had long coveted the throne, and with Tiberius on his deathbed, the prize seemed within his grasp. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Just months before Tiberius's death, Sejanus's own web of deceit unraveled. Sejanus's insatiable ambition and ruthless machinations eventually drew the ire of those closest to the emperor. Macro, a shrewd and opportunistic Praetorian officer, sensed Sejanus's vulnerability and seized his chance. With cunning precision, he planted seeds of doubt in Tiberius's mind, hinting at Sejanus's disloyalty and hidden aspirations for the throne. The emperor, ever suspicious and easily swayed, turned on his once trusted advisor. Sejanus, caught in a web of his own making, was stripped of his power and condemned to death. The once mighty Praetorian prefect, accustomed to wielding absolute authority, found himself dragged through the streets of Rome, a spectacle for the jeering crowds. His cries for mercy fell on deaf ears, and his pleas for leniency were met with scorn. In the end, Sejanus met a gruesome and humiliating end. He was strangled to death in the Tullianum, the notorious Roman prison, his lifeless body then tossed down the Gemonian stairs, where it lay exposed to the elements, a grim warning to any who dared challenge the power of the emperor. His corpse was left to rot, a feast for scavenging birds, and a stark reminder of the fleeting nature of ambition in the treacherous world of Roman politics. With Sejanus gone, the path to power lay open for Caligula. The young man, now 24 years old, had carefully cultivated his image as a harmless and dutiful grandson. He had endeared himself to the Praetorian Guard, showering them with gifts and promises of increased pay. The Senate, weary of Tiberius's oppressive rule, saw in Caligula a fresh start, a chance to restore balance to the empire. And so, amidst a chorus of cheers and a flurry of political maneuvering, Caligula ascended the throne. The Roman people, starved for hope and eager for a change, welcomed their new emperor with open arms. They saw in him a reflection of their own dreams, a young and vibrant leader who would usher in a golden age. But beneath the surface, a darkness lurked, a storm gathering strength, ready to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting empire. And so, amidst the cheers of the masses and the somber rituals of state, Caligula ascended the throne. The ceremony was a spectacle of pomp and grandeur, a testament to the might and majesty of Rome. As the golden laurel wreath was placed upon his brow, Caligula felt a surge of power, a sense of destiny fulfilled. The weight of history pressed upon him, the legacy of Augustus and the Julio-Claudian dynasty coursing through his veins. In that moment, something shifted within him. The whispers of ambition that had simmered beneath the surface for years now roared to life, emboldened by the boundless authority bestowed upon him. He was no longer merely a man, a survivor of Tiberius's cruel reign. He was the Emperor of Rome, the embodiment of divine power on earth. This belief, nurtured in the fertile soil of his own megalomania, and the sycophantic adulation of his courtiers, took root and flourished. Caligula, steeped in the mythology and traditions of his ancestors, saw himself as a god among men. He demanded to be worshipped, his statues erected in temples, his every whim obeyed without question. The early years of Caligula's reign were marked by a wave of optimism. He initiated a series of popular reforms, abolished unpopular taxes, and staged lavish public spectacles. The people adored him, and he basked in their adulation. But beneath the surface, the seeds of madness were already taking root. Caligula's extravagance knew no bounds. He built opulent palaces, commissioned massive public works, and indulged in every conceivable luxury. The treasury groaned under the weight of his spending, and the people, once so enamored with their young emperor, began to grumble. As Caligula's grip on reality loosened, his behavior became increasingly erratic and cruel. He executed senators on a whim, confiscated property, and reveled in public humiliation. The once beloved emperor was transforming into a monster, tyrant who ruled through fear and intimidation. And it was on the blood-soaked sands of the Colosseum that Caligula's true nature was laid bare for all to see. One day, during a gladiatorial spectacle, the emperor grew bored with the predictable bloodshed. A cruel smile twisted his lips as he ordered the guards to drag random spectators from the stands and throw them into the arena, unarmed and defenseless, to face the ravenous beasts. The crowd, once baying for the blood of gladiators, fell silent. Horror and disbelief washed over them as they watched their fellow citizens torn apart, their screams echoing through the ancient amphitheater. The once charming and charismatic youth had become a monster, a sadist, who reveled in the suffering of others. Caligula's transformation was complete. From that day forward, the Roman people lived in a state of perpetual terror. No one was safe from Caligula's capricious whims. Senators, courtiers, even his own family members fell victim to his paranoia and cruelty. The golden age they had envisioned had turned into a nightmare, a grotesque spectacle of excess and cruelty orchestrated by a man who believed himself to be a god. Caligula's reign of terror had begun, and the once mighty Roman Empire teetered on the brink of chaos. The seeds of madness, planted in his youth and nurtured by the intoxicating allure of power, had blossomed into a monstrous reality. The boy who would be God had become the emperor who would be feared. Chapter 2: The Descent into Madness. The honeymoon period of Caligula's reign was fleeting, a brief respite before the storm. In the months following his ascension, a darkness began to creep into his demeanor, a subtle shift that hinted at the madness lurking beneath the surface. Some whispered that it was a curse, a divine punishment for his hubris. Others blamed a mysterious illness that had struck him down shortly after becoming emperor, leaving him weak and delirious for weeks. This illness, which occurred in the first year of his reign, marked a turning point. While the exact nature of the illness remains a mystery, it's clear that Caligula emerged changed. Some historians speculate that the experience may have exacerbated underlying mental instability, contributing to his increasingly erratic and cruel behavior. Others point to the inherent pressures of absolute power or the poisonous influence of the imperial court. Whatever the cause of the illness, the once charming and benevolent ruler was transforming into a monstrous caricature of himself. Gone was the vibrant leader full of optimism, replaced by a ruler whose every action seemed to serve his growing delusions of grandeur. What had once been occasional impatience or sharp words morphed into fits of rage and violence. The citizens of Rome, who had initially celebrated their young emperor, now began to feel the chill of his capricious temper. The first signs of his descent were subtle, a flicker of impatience in his eyes, a cruel twist to his smile. But soon the whispers turned to screams. Caligula's cruelty knew no bounds. One fateful night, the esteemed senator Sextus Papinius was torn from his bed by the Praetorian Guard. His cries for mercy echoed through the opulent halls of his villa, but they were met with only the cold steel of swords and the grim determination of the emperor's henchmen. Dragged before Caligula, Papinius stood accused of treason, a charge as baseless as it was deadly. The emperor, his eyes gleaming with sadistic glee, listened with feigned interest as the senator pleaded his innocence. But Caligula had already passed judgment. With a wave of his hand, he condemned Papinius to a fate worse than death. The following day, in the Colosseum, a stage was set for a spectacle of unspeakable cruelty. The senator was stripped naked and bound to a wooden stake, his flesh exposed to the merciless gaze of the assembled crowd. A hush fell over the spectators, a mix of dread and morbid curiosity hanging heavy in the air. From the shadows emerged the executioner, his face concealed behind a grotesque mask that only added to the chilling atmosphere. In his hand he held a red-hot iron, its tip glowing with an infernal heat that promised excruciating pain. With a practiced motion, the executioner plunged the iron into Papinius's flesh, searing his skin and filling the air with the sickening smell of burning flesh. The senator's screams echoed through the Colosseum, a symphony of agony that delighted the twisted emperor. Again and again, the iron pierced his body, each thrust eliciting a fresh wave of torment. Caligula, seated on his gilded throne, watched the spectacle with rapt attention. His laughter, a chilling sound that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it, mingled with the senator's cries. The execution dragged on for hours, a gruesome display of the emperor's absolute power and utter disregard for human life. When it was finally over, Papinius's charred and broken body was left to rot in the arena, a grim reminder of the fate that awaited those who dared to defy the mad emperor. The crowd, once eager for entertainment, now filed out in stunned silence, their hearts heavy with dread. The executions became commonplace, a macabre spectacle staged for the emperor's amusement. The once proud Roman citizens, accustomed to order and stability, now lived in a state of perpetual fear. No one was safe from Caligula's wrath. The slightest perceived insult, a sideways glance, or even a moment of silence could trigger a violent outburst. The emperor's paranoia grew with each passing day, fueled by whispers of conspiracy and betrayal. He saw enemies lurking in every shadow, their daggers poised to strike. Caligula's palace, once a symbol of imperial grandeur, transformed into a den of depravity. Orgies raged through the night, fueled by wine and the emperor's insatiable appetite for pleasure. He forced noblewomen to perform for his amusement, their humiliation a source of twisted delight. Even his own sisters were not spared his depraved desires, their incestuous relationships a scandal that shocked even the most jaded members of the Roman elite. Initially, he showered his sisters with affection and favor, a stark contrast to the cold and distant relationship they had endured under Tiberius. But as Caligula's grip on reality loosened, his affections turned into something far more sinister. The historian Suetonius, known for his often scandalous accounts, wrote of even darker rumors swirling through the palace, whispered behind closed doors and veiled curtains. He claimed that Caligula had taken his sisters, Agrippina the Younger, Drusilla, and Julia Livilla, as his lovers. While the veracity of these claims is debated, with some historians suggesting they were politically motivated slander, they nonetheless contributed to the growing aura of depravity surrounding the emperor. Of his sisters, Drusilla was his clear favorite. He lavished her with gifts, bestowed upon her the title of Augusta, and even declared her his heir. When she died suddenly in 38 CE at 22 years old, likely from a fever, Caligula was inconsolable. He plunged into a deep mourning, declaring a period of national grief, and even deifying his beloved sister. But his grief soon turned to paranoia and suspicion. Agrippina the Younger and Julia Livilla, once basking in their brother's reflected glory, now found themselves the targets of his ire. Accused of plotting against him and engaging in adulterous affairs, they were stripped of their titles and exiled to remote islands. Livilla would later meet a grim fate, executed on Caligula's orders when she was 23 years old. Agrippina, however, would survive her brother's reign, her resilience a testament to her strength and determination. Even his half-brother, Claudius, was not immune to Caligula's cruelty. Though spared from execution, Claudius endured years of humiliation and mockery. The emperor, perhaps envious of Claudius's perceived weakness, delighted in making him the butt of his jokes. Claudius, afflicted with a pronounced limp, a stutter that tangled his tongue, and a tremor that shook his head, became a source of cruel entertainment for the emperor. Caligula would force him to participate in degrading spectacles, pushing him to stumble and fall in front of the court, or mocking his halting speech in front of assembled dignitaries. The emperor's laughter echoed through the palace halls, a cruel counterpoint to Claudius's silent shame. Caligula's treatment of his siblings was a microcosm of his reign, a disturbing blend of favoritism, paranoia, and ultimately violence. He was a man consumed by his own desires and fears, a ruler whose madness extended even to those closest to him. The once close-knit family, bound by blood and shared experiences, was torn apart by the emperor's cruelty, their lives forever scarred by the darkness that had descended upon their brother. Meanwhile, the venerable Senate, once a bastion of Roman tradition and authority, found itself reduced to a theatre for Caligula's twisted amusement. Caligula's demands on the Senate grew more outlandish. The once proud body, which had ruled Rome under the Republic, found itself reduced to a chorus of sycophants, nodding in agreement with every decree, no matter how absurd. The Senate had been humiliated before under other emperors, but none had shown such disdain for the institution as Caligula. His declarations became more extreme, his sense of omnipotence unchecked. In a particularly audacious display of contempt, in approximately 39 CE, Caligula elevated his beloved horse, Incitatus, to the consulship, a position traditionally reserved for Rome's most distinguished citizens, a position that had previously been occupied by the likes of Julius Caesar, Cicero, and Augustus himself, was now occupied by a horse. The magnificent stallion, adorned with a purple robe and a jeweled collar, was paraded through the streets, its hooves clattering on the cobblestones as it made its way to the Senate House. Senators, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and disbelief, were forced to bow before the horse, their solemn oaths of allegiance now directed towards a beast. The once hallowed halls of the Senate echoed with the sounds of Caligula's laughter, a cruel mockery of their traditions and a stark reminder of their impotence. The senators, stripped of their dignity and reduced to mere puppets, could only watch in silent despair as their beloved republic crumbled beneath the weight of the emperor's madness. As Caligula's reign progressed, his fear of plots and betrayals led to mass executions. Hundreds of senators and noble equestrians were executed on mere suspicion, while countless others were exiled or forced into hiding. Their families were left broken, their estates seized, and their names erased from public memory. Rome, once a city of vibrant discourse and power, had been transformed into a place where fear reigned supreme, and no one, no matter their rank, was safe from the emperor's wrath. The Roman Empire, once a beacon of civilization and order, now teetered on the brink of chaos. Caligula's madness, like a virulent plague, spread through the heart of Rome, infecting every aspect of society. The golden age that had seemed so tantalizingly close now seemed a distant and impossible dream. The people, once filled with hope, now prayed for deliverance from their mad emperor, their cries for mercy echoing unanswered in the blood-soaked streets of Rome. It was a stark reminder of the corrupting influence of unchecked power, a cautionary tale for all who dared to wield absolute authority without restraint or compassion. Chapter 3: The Emperor's Playground. Caligula's reign was not merely a descent into madness, it was also a grotesque carnival of extravagance, a testament to the boundless excesses that absolute power could unleash. The emperor, drunk on his own divinity and fueled by a bottomless treasury, embarked on a series of ambitious projects that defied both reason and restraint. Rome became Caligula's playground. Palaces sprung up overnight, their halls adorned with gold and precious gems. Vast gardens filled with exotic plants and sculpted fountains were created for his pleasure. The emperor's appetite for spectacle knew no bounds. He staged elaborate gladiatorial games, where condemned criminals and exotic beasts fought to the death for his amusement. He organized lavish banquets, where guests feasted on delicacies from across the empire, their tables groaning under the weight of roasted peacocks, stuffed dormice, and mountains of fresh oysters. But Caligula's extravagance was not merely a display of wealth and power, it was also a manifestation of his twisted sense of humor. He delighted in humiliating the Roman elite, forcing them to participate in his bizarre games and indulge in his every whim. Senators, once proud and respected figures, were made to run alongside his chariot, their faces contorted with exertion and shame. Noble women, accustomed to lives of luxury, were forced to serve as waitresses at his banquets, their delicate hands unfamiliar with bearing trays laden with food and wine. While Caligula's spectacles dazzled Rome, the financial burden quickly became apparent. To fund his lavish lifestyle and grandiose projects, he introduced oppressive new taxes and fines, which disproportionately affected the wealthy elite. The emperor ordered the confiscation of property from aristocratic families and even auctioned off the belongings of his predecessors. His frequent seizures of wealth from Rome's wealthiest citizens, under the guise of loyalty checks or false accusations, left many influential families bankrupt or fearful of his next move. This looting of the aristocracy, while filling his coffers, only deepened his unpopularity among the ruling class, who had initially welcomed his reign. In addition to these forced taxes, Caligula implemented ruthless tactics to ensure that Rome's treasury could sustain his extravagant spending. He resurrected unpopular taxes abolished by his predecessors and invented new ones, taxing everything from lawsuits to marriages. Even public restrooms were not exempt from the emperor's greed, earning him the nickname the Auctioneer Emperor in some circles. These relentless taxation schemes placed an immense strain on the Roman treasury and pushed many citizens into poverty. While the extent to which Caligula depleted the imperial coffers is debated, it's clear that his extravagant spending had severe economic consequences for the empire. Homes were seized, estates auctioned, and those who could not pay found themselves driven into poverty. Tens of thousands of Romans were affected by these financial measures, leading many to question whether the empire's survival was worth the cost of their suffering. The Roman people, initially awed by the emperor's displays of wealth and power, soon grew weary of his excesses. The treasury, once overflowing, was drained by Caligula's lavish spending. As taxes soared and resources dwindled, resentment simmered beneath the surface, a dangerous undercurrent that threatened to erupt into open rebellion. Caligula, oblivious to the growing discontent, continued his reckless pursuit of pleasure. His obsession with constructing opulent vessels reached new heights, with the creation of enormous pleasure barges on Lake Nemi, featuring marble floors, heated baths, and lush gardens. Caligula's ships, though extravagant, were designed primarily for personal indulgence rather than military or exploratory purposes. One of the most infamous symbols of his excess came in the year 39 CE during a notorious episode known as the Bridge of Boats. Determined to prove his dominance over nature itself, Caligula ordered the construction of a temporary bridge spanning the Bay of Naples, connecting the port of Puteoli to the luxurious resort town of Baiae. Hundreds of ships, commandeered from across the empire, were lashed together to form a floating pathway, a testament to both Roman engineering prowess and the emperor's insatiable desire for spectacle. Once completed, Caligula, clad in resplendent armor and a flowing purple cloak, rode triumphantly across the bridge on his beloved horse, Incitatus. His golden chariot, drawn by the magnificent stallion, gleamed in the sunlight, a sight that elicited a mix of awe and bewilderment from the assembled crowds. The Bridge of Boats, a symbol of both Caligula's ambition and his folly, stood for a brief moment in time before being dismantled, its memory lingering as a testament to the emperor's increasingly erratic and self-indulgent reign. This spectacle was a breathtaking display of imperial power, but it also served as a stark reminder of Caligula's growing detachment from reality. The bridge, a costly and impractical folly, symbolized the emperor's willingness to sacrifice the well-being of his people to satisfy his own ego. The lavish projects drained the Roman treasury at a time when the empire could ill afford such waste. The Roman people, once dazzled by their emperor's grandeur, now saw him for what he truly was, a madman consumed by his own delusions, a tyrant who cared more for his own amusement than the welfare of his empire. Chapter 4: Madness Unleashed. The year was now 39 CE, and the Bridge of Boats, a fleeting monument to Caligula's vanity, marked a turning point in his reign. The emperor, emboldened by his perceived triumph over nature, descended further into a spiral of paranoia and cruelty. Rome, once a city of majesty and order, now trembled under the shadow of his madness. The Senate, already reduced to a mockery of its former self, became a stage for Caligula's sadistic whims. Senators were summoned at all hours, forced to endure his rambling monologues and his cruel jests. Some were stripped of their wealth and property on a whim, their families left destitute. Others, deemed insufficiently enthusiastic in their praise of the emperor, were subjected to public humiliation or even execution. The once proud Roman aristocracy, accustomed to wielding power and influence, now lived in a state of perpetual fear. Whispers of conspiracy filled the air as senators and courtiers alike looked over their shoulders, wondering who would be the next to fall victim to the emperor's wrath. The palace, once a center of political discourse and refined social gatherings, transformed into a haunted house, its corridors echoing with the screams of the tortured and the desperate pleas of the condemned. Caligula's paranoia extended beyond the walls of the palace. He saw enemies everywhere, their plots and schemes lurking in every shadow. He ordered the execution of countless individuals, often on the flimsiest of pretexts. Informers thrived in this atmosphere of fear, their whispers fueling the emperor's delusions and sending innocent men and women to their deaths. One legendary story that has made its way into popular accounts, though not directly supported by reliable historical sources, is the tale of Caligula drowning a group of merchants in a flooded Colosseum. Accused of hoarding grain during a famine, they were herded into the Colosseum, not to face gladiators or wild beasts, but a far more insidious fate. The arena was flooded, transforming it into a makeshift lake. The merchants, their pleas for mercy drowned out by the lapping waves, were forced to swim for their lives, as Caligula watched from his balcony, his laughter echoing through the ancient amphitheatre. Exhausted and terrified, the merchants succumbed one by one, their bodies swallowed by the dark waters, leaving only ripples to mark their passing. The emperor's cruelty was not limited to humans. He reportedly took pleasure in inflicting unimaginable suffering on animals, his sadistic tendencies finding a perverse outlet in their torment. The once tranquil palace gardens, once filled with the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves, became a macabre playground for his twisted desires. Peacocks, prized for their iridescent plumage, were plucked alive, their desperate cries echoing through the manicured lawns. Caligula would watch with a chilling detachment as their once proud feathers were torn from their bodies, leaving them bloodied and quivering. Even the majestic lions and tigers, symbols of Rome's dominion over the natural world, were not spared his cruelty. During private spectacles, the emperor would have these magnificent beasts starved for days, their roars of hunger echoing through the palace dungeons. Then he would release them into the arena, not to face gladiators in honorable combat, but to tear each other apart in a frenzy of desperation and pain. Caligula's sadism extended beyond mere physical torment. He delighted in psychological torture, forcing animals to perform humiliating acts or subjecting them to bizarre and unnatural situations. He reportedly had a pet bear trained to dine at his table, its clumsy attempts at mimicking human behavior a source of amusement for the emperor and horror for his guests. These acts of cruelty, whispered by the palace staff and witnessed by terrified courtiers, painted a chilling portrait of a man whose madness had no limits. The palace gardens became a scene of carnage, a testament to the emperor's twisted mind and his insatiable appetite for suffering. The cries of the animals, their blood staining the marble floors, served as a chilling reflection of the horrors that had already taken hold of the Roman Empire, a microcosm of the madness and cruelty that permeated every corner of Caligula's reign. Caligula's madness wasn't confined to the borders of Rome. His foreign policy, much like his domestic rule, was a chaotic cocktail of ambition, paranoia, and outright absurdity. He harbored grandiose dreams of conquest, envisioning himself as a new Alexander the Great, leading Roman legions to unimaginable victories. In 39 CE, Caligula embarked on a bizarre and ill-conceived campaign against Britain. He marched his troops to the shores of the English Channel, only to order them to collect seashells as spoils of the sea. This farcical display of military might left his soldiers bewildered. Back in Rome, Caligula's paranoia fueled a series of diplomatic blunders. He antagonized neighboring kingdoms, demanding tribute and obedience from rulers who had long enjoyed peaceful relations with Rome. His erratic behavior and unpredictable demands strained alliances and sowed the seeds of future conflicts. One particularly infamous incident involved King Ptolemy of Mauritania, a loyal client king of Rome. During a visit to Rome, Caligula, consumed by jealousy over Ptolemy's lavish attire, had him summarily executed, his kingdom annexed to the Roman Empire. This act of wanton aggression sent shockwaves through the client kingdoms, undermining their trust in Rome and further destabilizing the empire's frontiers. Caligula's growing megalomania extended to eastern provinces as well. One of his most famous foreign manipulations was his relationship with King Herod Agrippa I of Judea. Herod Agrippa, a childhood friend of Caligula, skillfully navigated the emperor's unpredictable moods and ambitions. Caligula, seeing himself as a god-like figure, manipulated Agrippa and other Eastern kings to solidify his own image of divinity. In return, Herod Agrippa gained control over significant territories, a reward for his loyalty and flattery of the emperor. In a particularly audacious move, Caligula demanded that his statue be placed in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, a decision that nearly sparked a revolt. The Jews, who revered their temple as a sacred space free of idols, were outraged at this decree. Only through careful negotiation by Herod Agrippa and other intermediaries was an outright rebellion avoided. This episode reflects how Caligula's self-perception as a living god clashed with the deeply held religious beliefs of Rome's client kingdoms, creating tensions that could have destabilized the region. Caligula's foreign policy, much like his domestic rule, was a reflection of his deteriorating mental state. His paranoia and cruelty alienated allies and emboldened enemies, jeopardizing the stability of the empire and contributing to the growing sense of unease among the Roman people. Caligula's descent into madness reached its chilling zenith when, in a fit of megalomania, he declared himself a living god. No longer content with mere worship, he demanded to be addressed as Jupiter Latiaris, equating himself with the mighty king of the Roman pantheon. His palace echoed with the blasphemous title, uttered in fearful whispers by courtiers and slaves alike. To solidify this divine charade, Caligula commissioned the creation of a golden throne, a monument to his self-proclaimed divinity. This throne, a grotesque parody of religious iconography, was placed within the sacred confines of the temple of Castor and Pollux, a site revered by generations of Romans. There, draped in shimmering robes and adorned with a laurel wreath, Caligula would hold court, basking in the forced adulation of his subjects. The spectacle was both absurd and terrifying. Senators, once proud representatives of the Republic, now prostrated themselves before the emperor, their lips uttering empty praises and their eyes averted in shame. The common people, herded into the temple like cattle, watched in stunned silence as their ruler indulged in his blasphemous fantasies. The air crackled with tension, the unspoken fear of divine retribution hanging heavy over the proceedings. As the years passed, Caligula's reign of terror intensified, casting a suffocating pall over the formerly vibrant city of Rome. The Roman people, who had once brimmed with hope and optimism, now lived in dread, their every thought and action dictated by the fear of the emperor's capricious wrath. The empire, formerly a symbol of stability and order, teetered on the brink of collapse, its foundations crumbling under the weight of Caligula's madness. The bright future, once promised by the young and charismatic emperor, had dissolved into a suffocating nightmare, a dystopian reality where cruelty and fear reigned supreme. The people, trapped in this web of terror, saw no escape, no glimmer of hope on the horizon. The mighty Roman Empire, it seemed, was doomed to crumble under the weight of its own madness, its fate sealed by the whims of a tyrant who had lost all touch with reality. Chapter 5. The Fall of the mad emperor. In 41 CE, after nearly 4 years of his oppressive reign, Rome cowered under the rule of its mad emperor. Caligula's cruelty and paranoia had reached fever pitch, his every whim a matter of life and death for those unfortunate enough to cross his path. The once grand palace, now a gruesome stage for his twisted fantasies, echoed with the screams of the tortured and the desperate pleas of the condemned. But even in this atmosphere of fear and despair, a spark of resistance flickered. A conspiracy took shape, its roots entwining in the shadows, its tendrils reaching into the highest echelons of Roman society. Senators, once cowed into submission, now plotted in hushed tones, their resolve hardened by the emperor's excesses. Praetorian guards, their loyalty tested to the breaking point, began to question their oaths. Even with Caligula's own inner circle, doubt and discontent festered. At the heart of this conspiracy stood Cassius Chaerea, a high-ranking officer of the Praetorian Guard, a man whose loyalty to Rome burned brighter than his fear of the emperor. Chaerea, haunted by the senseless deaths of his comrades and driven by a burning desire for justice, became the catalyst for Caligula's downfall. He rallied his fellow conspirators, their shared hatred of the tyrant forging an unbreakable bond. The plot, meticulously woven in the hushed corners of the palace, reached its crescendo on the 24th of January, 41 CE. The Palatine Games, a grand spectacle honoring the deified Augustus, provided the perfect backdrop for the conspirators' deadly ballet. Amidst the throngs of cheering spectators and the pomp of ceremonial processions, Caligula, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows, moved through the crowd with his usual arrogance and swagger. Lured by a fabricated message, the emperor, accompanied by a small retinue of guards and courtiers, ventured into a dimly lit corridor beneath the Palatine Hill. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp stone and impending doom. As Caligula rounded a corner, he found himself face to face with Cassius Chaerea, his once trusted tribune, his expression twisted into a mask of cold determination. "Hail, Caesar!" Chaerea's voice dripped with false deference as he drew his sword, its blade gleaming in the flickering torchlight. The other conspirators emerged from the shadows, their faces grim, their weapons poised to strike. Caligula, caught in the snare, let out a startled cry. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. His guards, outnumbered and taken by surprise, were quickly dispatched, their blood mingling with the dust on the floor. The emperor, cornered like a trapped animal, lashed out in desperation, his futile attempts at defense met with a flurry of blows. Chaerea, his hatred fueled by years of pent-up rage, lunged forward, his sword plunging deep into Caligula's chest. The emperor's cry of pain was cut short as another blade found its mark, tearing through his flesh. The once mighty ruler, who had claimed divinity, now crumpled to the ground, his blood pooling around him like a crimson tide. The conspirators, their faces contorted with a mixture of triumph and revulsion, continued their brutal assault. Swords slashed, daggers pierced, each wound a testament to their hatred and their desperate desire for vengeance. Caligula's once proud body, now a mangled wreck, lay sprawled on the cold floor, his lifeblood seeping into the cracks and crevices, a final offering to the gods he had so arrogantly defied. But the bloodshed did not end with the emperor's death. Caligula's wife, Cassonia, and their infant daughter, Julia Drusilla, were both killed on the same day as part of the orchestrated purge. Caesonia had been a fiercely loyal partner to Caligula, standing by his side during his most erratic and dangerous moments. Described by some as having a wild and reckless spirit, she was a devoted mother and had given birth to Julia Drusilla just months before. As news of Caligula's assassination spread, Caesonia and the child were quickly targeted by the conspirators, who sought to eliminate any potential claims to the throne. Their deaths, though brutal, were seen as necessary by the conspirators to secure Rome's future and prevent any surviving family members from rallying support for the fallen emperor. By the time of his death, Caligula had left an indelible scar on the Roman Empire. Thousands had been executed, either through his paranoia-fueled purges or his sadistic public spectacles. Countless others had been bankrupted or left in ruin, their families destroyed by the emperor's cruelty. The news of Caligula's assassination spread like wildfire through the city. The Roman people, freed from the yoke of tyranny, poured into the streets, their cheers echoing through the alleyways. The Senate, emboldened by the emperor's demise, convened in haste, eager to restore order and reclaim their lost authority. Meanwhile, Caligula's body was hastily buried in a shallow grave in the Lamian Gardens, and would later be exhumed and cremated by his sister, who returned from exile to give their brother a proper, albeit belated, funeral. Caligula's death left a power vacuum, a void that threatened to plunge the empire further into chaos. The Praetorian Guard, sensing an opportunity to assert their influence, threw their support behind Claudius, Caligula's unassuming and often mocked half-brother. Claudius, thrust into the spotlight, ascended the throne with a mixture of trepidation and determination. He generally proved to be a capable and effective leader, successfully restoring order and stability to an empire reeling from Caligula's chaotic reign. The Roman people, exhausted by years of terror and uncertainty, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The streets, once filled with fear and suspicion, now buzzed with a cautious optimism. The nightmare was finally over, and a new dawn seemed to be breaking over the empire. The fall of the mad emperor marked a turning point in Roman history, a moment of reckoning for an empire teetering on the edge of the abyss. The lessons learned from Caligula's tyranny would echo through the ages, a cautionary tale for all who dared to wield power without restraint or compassion. Thank you for watching and listening to this episode of Fireside Villainies, Caligula, the Mad Roman Emperor. If you liked this episode of Fireside Villainies, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. And so, the story of Caligula, the Mad Roman Emperor, comes to an end. His reign, a whirlwind of extravagance, cruelty, and unchecked power, serves as a chilling reminder of how ambition, left unrestrained, can devastate entire nations. In just 4 short years, Caligula transformed from a beloved prince into one of history's most reviled tyrants, his name forever synonymous with madness and depravity. But Caligula's story is not simply a cautionary tale about a single man. It's a mirror held up to human nature, reflecting the dangers of power without limits or morality. It challenges us to consider how fragile civilization can be, how easily order can turn into chaos when those in power lose their sense of responsibility and compassion. As we reflect on Caligula's reign, we are confronted with uncomfortable truths about leadership, the allure of absolute control, and the consequences of unchecked authority. His fall, though dramatic, also reveals a glimmer of hope, that resistance to tyranny is possible, even in the darkest of times. The courage of those who stood up to Caligula serves as a reminder that the human spirit can prevail. even when faced with overwhelming oppression. So a key lesson from Caligula's downfall is that power, when unchecked, is dangerous not only to those who wield it, but also to those who suffer beneath it. Thank you for joining me through this sinister chapter of Roman history. I hope this exploration of Caligula's life and villainy has been immersive and thought-provoking. If you're interested in exploring the lighter side of history, the lives of remarkable and inspiring people who have shaped our world, you might like to check out our sister channel, Fireside Legacies. There's a link in the video description. You can also support Fireside Villainies by becoming a member to help bring more episodes like this to life. Members get access to exclusive content, early access to new episodes, and more. Check out the video description for more info. History is not just a collection of dates and facts. It's an array of intertwining threads of human experience, both noble and ignoble. And it's through understanding the past, even its darkest chapters, that we can learn to build a better future. Stay tuned to Fireside Villainies for more sinister stories from history. Until next time, tread carefully in history's shadows.